Hello and welcome to the Forge for March of 2025. My name is Phil Hull. I'm the Divisional Director of Mission and Spiritual Development for the Indiana Division, and I help coordinate the Forge each month. We are in our third month of studying spiritual disciplines using the book Disciplines of a Godly Man by R. Kent Hughes. There are versions of the book in both English and Spanish available, and I encourage you to buy a copy to help expand the study of spiritual disciplines with your group. The neighborhood where I live is kind of strange. The subdivision was built in the 1990s, and all of the houses were built using only two basic designs. As you go down the street, 75% of the homes have the same design as my house, which is a boxy two-story house with a door off on the side of the house. Forget a front porch, there's really nothing at all in the front of my house other than a driveway and a garage. While I'm grateful for the house I live in, I think the way these houses are designed reflects the reality of how disconnected we are from our neighbors. Houses aren't built anymore with large front porches in walkable neighborhoods. The priority is to separate us from our neighbors and build up higher fences for our privacy. Today's homes reflect our modern values of individualism, isolation, and privatization. It's no longer common to know the families that live on the block where you live. I have lived in my house for 8 years, and I have a neighbor immediately next to me who has never once spoken to me or even acknowledged my existence, despite my many attempts to greet her. All of these factors reflect the growing lack of community and connection we have with people in our society today. Being connected is a part of the way that God designed us. It's also something that seems to be lacking in our society more than any time in history. We have so many opportunities to be connected thanks to technology, but it's actually leading to increased isolation and loneliness. The lack of connection and community isn't just something we feel, it's something that's backed up by data. A 2021 study showed that men are lonelier than ever. Only 27% of men say they have 6 close friends. That number is half what it was 30 years ago. Even worse than that, 15% of men say they have no close friends at all. That number is up an astounding 500% since 1990. A different Pew Research study in 2023 found that 63% of men under the age of 30 are single. There are literally tens of millions of men in this country without any significant relationships in their lives. This lack of connection also impacts our health. According to the Surgeon General's office, loneliness and social isolation increase the risk for premature death by 26 to 29%. In addition, poor or insufficient social connection is associated with increased risk of heart disease, including a 29% increased risk of heart disease and a 32% increased risk of stroke. It's also associated with increased risk for anxiety, depression, and dementia. I have more numbers, but honestly, I really don't want to share them because they're all just sad. We are created for connection, but so many people in our society are isolated and disconnected from other people. It's up to us to change things, and one of the ways we can do that is through the spiritual discipline of friendship. Jesus is our example. His ministry was centered on deep friendships with the 12, whom he repeatedly called friends. And there was also the inner circle of 3 with whom he formed an even deeper friendship and to whom he bared his heart. Being a Christian is all about relationships. our relationship with God through Jesus and with the Holy Spirit, but also our relationships with our fellow believers. We see an amazing example of true spiritual friendship in the Old Testament between King Saul's son Jonathan and the man who would follow Saul as king, David. If you've grown up in church, you've probably heard many stories of David's heroism and bravery, but Jonathan was no slouch either. He was also a great warrior and a great leader. And it would be easy for Jonathan to be jealous as the king's heir apparent, to see David come along as the anointed future king. But they had an immediate connection with each other, and a deep friendship developed. Let's see how it's recorded in the book of 1 Samuel, chapter 18. It says, "After David had finished talking with Saul, he met Jonathan, the king's son. There was an immediate bond between them, for Jonathan loved David. From that day on, Saul kept David with him and wouldn't let him return home. And Jonathan made a solemn pact with David because he loved him as he loved himself. Jonathan sealed the pact by taking off his robe and giving it to David, together with his tunic, sword, bow, and belt. This scene comes immediately after David had killed Goliath and won the attention and adoration of the entire nation of Israel. It's also the point where Saul began to see David as a threat to his power. It would have been easy for Jonathan to feel the same, but he had an instant friendship with David, and they truly cared for each other. Jonathan even went as far as giving David his robe, his sword, and his armor. This was a huge honor for this prince to give his robe to the shepherd and treat him as his equal. Jonathan maintained a fierce loyalty to David as their friendship grew. This happened in spite of the fact that Saul was actively hunting David, trying to kill him. At one point, Jonathan convinced his father to make an oath not to harm David, one that Saul did not keep. Over and over again during their friendship, they reaffirmed their commitment to each other and looked out for each other in very trying circumstances. What can we learn from the example of deep spiritual friendship we see between Jonathan and David? Deep friendships and friendships in general are there to be made if we value them as we ought, and if we practice some simple disciplines of friendship. First, through prayer. We must pray specifically for God's help in making inward changes that will expand our capacities for friendship. And we must pray for the opportunity to develop friendships. Also, through friendliness. No matter what our personality, we need to work at being friendly. We need to be consciously cheerful. We need to ask questions. We need to place ourselves in situations where friendships happen. Next, through work. You can have just about anything you want if you work for it. We generally get what we set our sights on. And this is also true of friendships. Those who have friends place great importance on them. We can do it through affirmation. If we work at affirming others, we will have friends. Be generous with honest affirmations, and you will have friends. Next is through listening. If you will work at being a good listener, you will develop friends. Listen well, and people will discover they are important to you, which is key to any friendship. Next is through acceptance. If we discipline ourselves to be accepting, others will be willing to open up to us and seek the connection we are offering. An open, accepting soul is like a well-lit home on a cold, dark night. We need to put some holy sweat into our relationships. We need to resist the lure of our isolating architecture and overcome the isolating lure of our digital screens. Most of all, we must overcome our privatized hearts. For our Christian faith is a relationship with God and His people. God's truth is most effectively learned and lived in relationships. Friendships hold the promise of grace.